Hello, aspiring developers. Welcome back to today's session where we are going to learn about documenting our codes. So let's dive right in. Documentation is an important aspect in programming, just like in every other aspect of life. So documentation helps us especially in maintaining some organization. That is, a clear and well documented code is crucial, especially for collaborating, for maintainability, and for understanding. So some practical aspects to guide us through documentation. One, you know that you need to use names that are more of, I can call them descriptive names. You see my folder here is named documentation, or you can see here Explorer documentation. That is the folder that I created, an empty folder, and then I opened code using that folder. Just to be sure, I can open my terminal, and from the terminal you just see the location of whatever folder I'm talking about. It is in D, JavaScript, then documentation. So this documentation is an empty folder and it is the one that I opened. I've just used the ls command, the terminal, because I'm using the bash terminal. We'll learn over a few terminal methods. Yeah, so in this command, I may want to have a script.js tag. And as I said, it's good to have descriptive names for your files. So here I can just say math.js. So this is a JavaScript file within my documentation folder. And say I want this function to take to, or rather to, okay, say calculate the function of the sum or mathematical computation of specific. So let's just say mathematical computation. Yeah. So you may want the first mathematical computation to be addition, and maybe subtraction. Let's complete with remainder. So you want a program that does these three functions. So it is important, first of all, to add comments to your code. Comments provide an understandable description of what the code is doing. So keep the following in mind when you're adding comments. You should describe why. You don't just restate what the code is, what the code does. Instead, you can explain why it is doing that, so that you can call this the business assumption or the algorithm step. So in addition, we want a mathematical computation that does addition. So here you can say, okay, you can just simply declare the function. So say const add equals. Okay, so here we have a function add. Let's say it takes input num1 and num2, and then it returns. So whatever is returning is the sum of num1 and num2. So you can simply pass some some comments to say add num1 to num2. Then there you can pass in the you can say add num1 to num2. So you can just say num1 plus num2. Here you've already added num1 to num2. Then you can say and store it in a variable num, in a variable sum. So here you have let sum equals num1 plus num2. Then finally you want to say return. You just need to return sum. So yes, you know that you're basically returning sum, but here you can also add a comment to say return return the sum. And you can do the same across subtraction and remainder. So let's just do the same against across subtraction and remainder. So for subtraction, you can say const subtract, and we say here subtract. So you see, for addition, it was straight to the point. Just add num1 to num2. But now for subtraction, I will simply say subtract. Now we are subtracting. Are we subtracting num1 from num2 or num2 from num1? So here you can simply say subtract num1 from num2 and store it in a variable. Yeah, you can store it in a variable value. Oh, okay, let's give it. Okay, you can say, yeah, in a variable output. So here you'll simply say let output equals, you return num1 subtracted from num2. So it will basically be num2 minus num1. Then you're going to return output. So here you say return the output. Then for the remainder, you can also define a variable remainder, or rather a function remainder, and just say, instead of that, you can simply say find the remainder. So find the remainder of num2 divided by num1. Or you can simply say of num1 divided by num2. And so here now, we'll simply come and say rem num1, because it's remainder, we'll use the modulus operator. Where is it? There, yes. And then here you return the remainder. So you see that these are basic mathematical function to perform some basic maths operation. So this is one reason why we need to do documentation. The second important aspect of documentation is the formatting. You should format your comments for maximum readability. That is, you see that these comments are indented. This one is at the first level. Then you see that this one is indented, just as whatever it's describing. So indentation helps with readability of your codes. You can say maybe just create a new function. Which one haven't we done? Multiplication. So const multiply. Yeah, equals, this one will also take num1 and num2. And now here maybe you don't know what to do yet, so just come and add to do, and you say there multiplication, or to do implementation. Implement, you just explain what you want to do. So implement multiplication. Yeah, so here you have a basic commented out to do that tells you that later you need to implement multiplication. So you see that this one explains to you that about what you should be doing later. You may notice that in my case, my comments are turning to some bit of a yellowish color, and my to-do is also turning to a bit of some is this orangish color. So this is because of extensions that I'm having to perform, or rather to help me with that function. So if I go to extensions, I have JSDoc is just to quickly create JS documentation samples, especially for the comments, for the functions, sorry. So you see this one selects all parameters of function, input the generate JSDoc command, and JSDoc function comments will be generated. But there are also other like the to-do list. I talked about the to-do list. So if I just tap on to do, you'll see this to do list, this one here. This one enables me to write to do. When I write on to do, then it changes first the syntax to the orangish, you see, from this point to orangish, and then it lists all this, and you can always check on them later. Then for the markdown or for the comments, I use the markdown lint, or you can just use the markdown all in one. This one will come with everything that you need for the markdown. Yeah, so there's this markdown all in one. I'd prefer that. And for the to-do list, you can just use the to-do list. Then for the documentation, you can use the JS doc. We'll understand that better. So comment is effective when it explains whatever you want to. Rather, commenting does not only apply in JavaScript files. You can have your index.html and you can still pass in your own. You can still pass in your documentation even in the index.html. So you just say to do, and here you say maybe to do is to write a code. To take user input and call calculated function. So you see that even in HTML, you can still have documentation. So let me just write here, documentation file. Same to CSS. Even in CSS, you can also have documentation files. So style.css. And you can simply pass in a documentation, say to do, and you say style my documentation, my HTML file. So as simple as that, all files can have documentation, whether it's .css, .html, or .javascript. The other important thing, we've been talking about pushing to GitHub for you to save your codes. And we already explained how to use this, how to use the terminal. And we talked about the git init to initialize a Git repository. Then we talked about the git add, but now I remember we said we should be using the git add and the file name that you want to add. So say index.html, but that can be a bit slow. So you can just use the period to add everything that you need to add. Let me zoom in a bit. Then you can also tap on git commit. Then now here you want to commit index.html and the commit message that you want to pass. Now when passing commit messages, pass suitable Git commit messages. Good commit messages are essential for effective collaboration and especially for debugging. So one of the benefits of these proper commit messages, it is the clarity when creating a pull request. That is when you collaborating with some people. Then it is easier to track implementation. So for you to write a good commit message, use the imperative present tense. An example, initialization of HTML structure. So here you can say hash 01 because this is the first commit, and you just say initialize, use imperative present tense. So initialize index page. See, this is explanatory, then it is in imperative tense. Then it is a complete commit message. So you just tap on enter, and that is a commit for the index.html. You can do the same for the style.css. So style.css. So for style.css, it is now this the second commit. You know perfectly well that is the second commit. And using this hash 0102 will be very important for you because it will be easier for you to track the changes. You know that by default, Git provides some complex commit codes or other commit IDs. So if you create your own IDs, it will be easier for you to follow through. So for hash 2, you can say initialize styling, style sheet, initialize style sheet. And for the script, you know that we have completed the functionality. So you can say something like complete, or rather, yeah, we complete, say complete basic functionality. You know that a few are still remaining, but here you have complete basic functionality. And this is for the math.js. Math.js. Yeah, so you already have that. You know, for you to push, you need to publish this branch. Remember, we started all the way from Git init. So we need to publish this branch. You simply tap on publish branch, give it a name, documentation, and you can publish to a public repository or a private repository. You notice that the changes are syncing. Okay, we successfully published the documentation to GitHub. But I see that there seems to be some trouble here. Allow me to just git push once again. And I want to set upstream, set origin. Okay, or rather I'll deal with that problem a bit later, but for now, you know perfectly well that when you don't have any letter here, it means that these changes have already been, the commit has already occurred. So now the final thing on documentation is to have a proper README file. So you always know that when you initialize projects with GitHub, it normally auto generates for you some readme.md file. This always serves as the entry point of your documentation. So for readme, you can have the extensions that I mentioned. And important for the readme, this one serves as the documentation for your project. Those other ones were just inline commenting, just organization. Maybe if you have images, you just create a folder, maybe images, and you store your images within that images folder. Those are conventions. But now for the readme.md, this is important for the exact documentation. So inside your readme file, the first thing that you should you should think of having is the project title and the project description. So project title, you can also have a project description. I started by writing like this because so that you could see this underlined links. This is because I have the markdown all in one. So that one will help you to know whenever you have an error in your readme syntax. It's good to correct all the errors. Mine, I have them corrected on autosave because of the markdown all in one. So on autosave, it corrects all the errors. Okay, so as long as you have the project title, the project description, other important things you need to have, the installation instruction if at all you're using a framework. So say installation instructions. You can also have, say, the folder structure and explanation. Folder structure and explanation. Sorry. Finally, you can have some known issues in your code, and you can close with credits. You haven't learned about licensing yet, but when you create GitHub accounts, you see something on licenses. So you can also have licensing and versioning, because GitHub is a version control system. GitHub is a version control system. So these are a few important aspects that you can include in your documentation. So example now, these are just a documentation. This is just a documentation page. The project here is documentation. The documentation itself, currently we still don't have it. I'm going to leave all this with ellipsis, so that later we can always have a look at them. Yeah, so we just have dots for those sections. So you should remember that when writing this self-documented clean code is a skill that improves with practice. So the more you write this documentation, or the more you develop projects, the more you get the gist of how to write your documentation. It's not a must that you follow this guideline, but this is an important guideline, especially for to the point that we have reached with this current course. So a readme, this first part, project title and description, it clearly states what the project is about. So here is the title. The title is documentation, just as my folder. The description will explain more about what this project is. And then the installation instructions. Here you can just simply explain how to set up the project. You can just maybe guide someone and tell them to git clone, and then they cd to that project name, like let's say cd documentation, and then something like they just tap on go live, and that is it for the installation instructions. Then you can have the usage guide to describe how to use the project. That is, I've skipped that because that is especially when you have APIs and you have hidden your APIs. Then the folder structure will have a brief outline and the organization of the code base. Then the known issues here, you can just simply have something like say some problem or some limitations or some things that have not been implemented yet. Like for our case, we know about this multiplication is not working. So you can just have that as a known issue in this documentation section. Then for credits, if you are the only one who developed it, you can take all the credits. If at all you took support from an external library, it's important to give credits to that external library. Then for the licensing, here if at all there is a license that you have used with GitHub to host, then it's important to pass in that license, whatever license that you're using, say MIT or something, just pass in there. Yeah, so that's it for the readme.md. But you've seen me using this hash, but you may not be understanding what this hash means. So briefly, allow me to explain the readme syntax. So right here in the project description, I'm going to pass a few markdown syntax. We already have seen the hash. So, okay, I can start with headers. So headers. And you know that headers, we have the first level, first to sixth, first to sixth level headers. And the first level header is denoted by a hash. The sixth, so you can say hash is for the first level. First level. And the 6, 1, 2, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 6 is denoted by 6 hashes. Yeah, so you see that here we have an issue, but you can simply wrap all these in parentheses. You can cap that issue. I believe it's because it is receiving some syntax which is not understood. Yeah, so the first level header is denoted by just a single hash. Then the second level header is denoted by 2, going down to the sixth header. Then we also want to you may also want to focus on emphasis. So that was on headers. We have emphasis. For emphasis, these are denoted by, you can either use these ones, code within asterisks. So code within asterisks, this one will make it bold when you have two asterisks. When you have one asterisk, this will make it italics. And then you can use a single. You can also use a single underscore. So you say emphasis. So you see that this one is also a type of an emphasis. It is almost bold. It is almost italics, but it isn't. You see, if you control save, it even changes the single asterisk to underscores for italics. So the convention for italicizing is the underscore. So let's just maintain the underscore for italics. Yeah, also there's this on lists. If you want to have an ordered or an unordered list. For an ordered list, just use the minus, the plus, or the asterisk followed by a space. So you can simply say 1, enter, 2, enter. Or you can simply use the plus and you say 1, enter, 2, enter. Or you can simply use the hyphen, 1, enter, 2, enter. So you see this one, you note that unordered list, here it specifies, or rather it prefers the dashes for the unordered list, but you have seen that even a plus can be used and even the asterisks can be used. This is when they are on the same level, that you notice that this circle is filled, but when it is indented, you notice that when it is indented, you notice that the circle is not filled, to show another level of indentation. So for the ordered list, just use numbers followed by a period and a space. So for ordered list, just use something like 1 space, then you write whatever you want. Then 2 will automatically space and number itself for you. So as you continue going down. So the most important syntax, just know that for the bold you need double asterisks on both ends of what you want to be bold. For the italics, you need underscores. For the unordered list, you need these hyphens. For the ordered list, you need 1 period then space, 2 period, 1 period then space. The other important thing that we can talk about, so 3 here was on lists, and I can just indent this. We have unordered, unordered. They have to be together. It has to touch whatever is being highlighted. So this was the list on ordered, then indented, and the unordered. So finally, Okay, this should not be indented. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, we'll sort this. So for the fourth item that you want to tackle, the fourth item will tackle links. So how to pass links using markdown files. For links, you simply use that. You start with square brackets followed by the parentheses. So this first part, you write the name that you want the user to see. So here I can say convention. Okay, GitHub link, and then here I just tap github.com, the link itself, such that when anybody taps on this GitHub link, it will open github.com. So it is also important to have full URLs. So that is how to write a list or a link, sorry. So that is how to create a link. For the images, it follows almost similar. It is almost similar to the links. So for the images, it is also similar. You just, first one, you use the name of the image or the image that, or the alternative text that you want to have on the image. So you just say the alt text. And then the second bit, you pass in the URL of that image. So images, currently I have no image in my images folder, but I can simply say image1 image1.png, and then you start with an asterisk. Yeah, so for images, you put an asterisk first, not asterisk but exclamation mark, then the alternative text, followed by okay, yeah, followed by the image itself. Then the sixth item that we're going to look at is the code blocks. So for code blocks, just simply use code blocks. What's the matter here? Okay, if it's misbehaving, we can just use headers to give us a bit more control over it. Third one is lists. Fourth one is links. The fifth one is images. And just like HTML, it is important to note that a H1 is important, and you must have a H1. Then the other ones, you can always have multiple of them. So for the code blocks, I just wanted to say that here you use single code blocks when you just want to pass inline code blocks, like let's say console, or rather you say printing in JavaScript, printing in JS, say in JS is achieved by, then you pass in there console.log documentation. But now when you want to pass in a larger block of code, you see that this is just an inline code. But if you want to pass in a larger block of code, you can just use the three backticks, and now you have to specify whatever code that you are passing there. So whether it's JavaScript, you can just use the JS or complete JavaScript extension. You see that it creates a code block for you. And you can also pass in whatever JavaScript code that you wanted to pass in there. Yeah, so you see that this one even adds the styling for the JavaScript code. You notice that even if you pass in some comments, it will still have them the way JavaScript has them. So that's it for the code blocks. We also have the horizontal lines. There are several ways of adding horizontal lines. So let me just say here horizontal rules. Horizontal lines are like this line that we have below every second level header. So it can simply be added by three how is this called, hyphens. This one, see that it creates this horizontal line. The other way that you can add a horizontal line is by adding three asterisks, and the final way that you can have a horizontal line is using three underscores. So you see all of them create the horizontal line, but the conventional one is the use of the underscore, is the use of the hyphen. Sorry, this is the hyphen. Hyphen is the most, or rather the conventional way of defining a horizontal line. So I'll leave the conventional one so that you can know it, or rather you can bank on it. You just leave it like that. Yeah, then we also have block quotes. So we'll finalize with the block quotes. Block quotes. So block quotes are simply written with greater than sign followed by the block quote. So you can just say this is a block quote. I believe we learned block quotes in HTML. So this is how to write a block quote in Markdown. So you should remember to preview your Markdown content to ensure it looks as expected. And you see that mine I'm previewing just beside my page here. Okay. See, we have some extra stuff there. Yeah. So remember to preview your Markdown before you commit it. Allow me add some image to this images folder. I'll just drag and drop some image. Yeah, now I've added an image to my images.jpg. I just used the drag and drop, but my screen recording software cannot allow me to show the folder in which I dragged the image from and dropped it in our Visual Studio Code. Yeah, so now with the image here, I can call this image. I remember I said I'll show you how to pass in the image. So images, in my images folder, I have the image1.jpg. So you just pass in image1.jpg. And you see that your email is passed to your Markdown file. Yeah, so documentation simply refers to the process of creating a written explanation and guidelines for your codes, your projects, or your software. It serves as a bridge between the code and the users. Because for your case, maybe you understand these three hashes, these dots, you understand these spaces that you're leaving here, you understand all that. But for your users, they may not be able to understand that. So you see that this is how they are going to see it, but this is how you code it. So it is the bridge between the code and the users, making it easier for others and maybe even you in future to understand, use, and maintain that software or that project that you are handling. So documentation is important because when your code is well documented, especially now these inline documentations, when it is well documented, it helps you to explain the purpose, the logic, the usage, and the different parts of your code. Yeah, then another important reason why you should do your documentation, when you want to collaborate with a team, then documentation will help other members of your team to understand whatever you're trying to do in your code. So they can quickly understand the piece of code by the document that you provide for them. Then it is good when maintaining and debugging, because when later maybe subtract function does not work well, you just come and look for subtraction, and then you easily or quickly debug. Maybe here you see you wrote subtract num1 from num2, and here you just took num2 minus num1. So this was not working well, so you just come and debug. So that is easy when you have your document inline comments for documentation. Also, when there are new developers to the team, especially maybe later when you're collaborating on a bigger project, you find that the project base is documented, it will be easier for you to understand and proceed. But if it is not documented, it will be difficult for you to grasp. Yeah, so that is the why of documenting and the what is documenting. We already learned how to pass documentation. I've also learned a bit of the Markdown syntax. I believe I'm going to push this repository, and I'm going to leave down the link to this repository below in the comment section, so you can in the video description, so you can always tap on it and remind yourself of how to write documentation. Yeah, so that's it. The only thing that we haven't tackled today, you see that mine is highlighting problems. Yeah, in case I have some problems in my code, you see that it highlights them. So this, I know this is just misbehaving because you see that we cannot have no emphasis as heading. So emphasis can be used instead of heading. Though here we have a heading and then an emphasis. So that is why it is throwing that problem. You can simply say types of lists. Yeah, then you say unordered and ordered. So you see that the problem has already been solved. Just indent this. And you see emphasis can be used instead of headings. Yeah, no problem. Or rather, we can just leave it as types of list ordered, and then we've already learned about the unordered. So this is how to make it bold. Then this one has an error just because of the spacing. Sorry. Only the spacing is the one causing the error there. So you see some will not be auto-corrected, but most will be corrected. And you see those yellow lines just because they have the Markdown all-in-one, which provides shortcuts for common Markdown tasks. Then there's also the Markdown lint extension. There's the Markdown lint. Yeah, this one, it helps to draw those yellowish lines in case you have an error in your syntax. Then you have the Markdown previewer. This is the one that helps me to see whatever type of how my Markdown will be previewed. So those three extensions are important when writing Markdown files. Yeah, so that's it for the Markdown, or rather the documentation. I believe what is important and we haven't tackled is that what I had left out is the Markdown. We call it the, how is it called, table of contents. So you just type in table of contents, table. So you see Markdown all-in-one creates table of contents. So when you tap on create table of contents, you see that it generates a table of contents for us, and it updates it whenever you update it. So note here the word project description. If I add an S, it definitely adds an S automatically. So you can use that Markdown all-in-one previewer to add how is this called, to add table of contents. So allow me have it as a title and say table of contents, and it will also add this as a title here. Yeah, so that's it for today's video. More on documentation will be provided as time goes by. It is also important to note that you become better in documenting when you do lots of documentation. So when you do lots of documentation, you get lots of insights, and the insights can guide you on writing even better codes. So to this point, if you watch to this point, I would want to thank you for taking your time to understand documentation. I believe you've been inspired, and I also believe that by the time you try accessing this page, then it will be having these bits of places filled by whatever should be filled in those bits of places. Otherwise, have a happy coding week.